Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Community Corner. Unfortunately, today I am without my beautiful wife, who has to finish up one more week at her regular job before she comes on the road with me full-time. But I am very, very blessed today to be joined by Steve Schwalje, who is a fantastic representative for Northwestern Mutual on the seacoast of New Hampshire, also covering the rest of the state and the Lakes region. And Steve, it's great to have you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me, Glenn.
So I know you and I have talked a couple times about Northwestern Mutual and the things that you actually do to help educate folks on a lot of different things. If you want to spend a couple minutes telling us about what you do and what services you offer.
Sure. So Glenn, as you know, I'm a financial advisor and fiduciary with Northwestern Mutual. So that means that I help individuals, families, and small businesses from a planning perspective. So we really take a look at the overall picture. We don't try to focus on one particular area. We want to see where people want to go, where they're headed, and address the needs along the way with the intent to be well positioned. And that means that you have different options when you come to the different crossroads of life. So for saving for retirement, or saving for kids' education, or a new Ferrari, whatever the plan may call for, we want to get you there well positioned. And that's a resounding theme, and given today's current circumstances is a really great example that our clients are well positioned. And our clients that arrived in January, just before things started to get interesting, were well positioned then. And then in the middle of March, when the market, for example, had taken an obvious multi-week downturn, they're still well positioned. And people have asked me so many times over the last month, are people calling you every day? Are people freaking out? And the answer is no, because Northwestern Mutual and our approach is built for this. Our clients aren't freaking out because they know that they're in a very good place and that they're well positioned. And it's the other people that tend to be freaking out because maybe they don't have a plan. So now more than ever, people need us. People need people like me to give them guidance. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Absolutely. You know, I had the privilege of connecting with somebody yesterday that is already in their retirement years and would appear to most people to have their act together. I was shocked to find out they didn't have a fiduciary. So from my standpoint, if someone is watching this video today and they do not have a fiduciary, call Steve. I think what you folks offer and the peace of mind that you bring to the table for your clients, especially in times like this, are absolutely huge. So one of the things that you and I have talked about a little bit since our COVID quarantine has started, really the reason I wanted to have you on today, one of the awesome things that you've done, and having known you for about a year now, you've always been an educator. Your belief is similar to Christy and I's, that folks need to be educated on things so that they can make the best decisions possible. We love that about you. And what I really love is as soon as we started to do our home quarantining period about a month or 5 weeks ago now, one of the first people that I heard, actually the first person I heard across the state of New Hampshire to raise their hand and offer free advice for folks without any strings attached was you, Steve. I love the fact that you're offering time out of your day for people that aren't your clients at all, that maybe have other fiduciaries, and just have some quick questions out about a few things. So I think that's phenomenal, especially given the fact that we're sort of in a market blip right now. And if you want to talk a little bit about how you're structuring those sort of phone call opportunities.
Yeah, sure. So I'd like to just point out, and you just touched on it, that I am never interested in disrupting an existing relationship or stepping on anybody's toes, if you will. A lot of my clients already have advisors, and we simply look to complement where it makes the most sense. We tend to get into a lot of conversations where people say, oh, Steve, I already have an advisor, I'm not interested. And just with a very minimal amount of digging, I'll say, well, what does your advisor do for you? Well, they manage my money. Thank you very much. I'm like, great. Have they told you if you have enough for retirement? And I get a blank look, like, oh, I don't know. Oh, if they talk to you about the costs of long-term care later in life and how you're going to address them? No, they haven't really done that. I'm like, well, then I think it might be worthwhile sitting down. So one of the things that changed for me personally in my practice at the onset of this was I like to meet people face to face. I think it goes a long way in establishing a relationship with people that are new in your life, especially when you're talking about pretty important subjects like money or housing, and planning for the future, life and death. And my last in-person meeting was March 16th, and then the world was shut down. So I found myself with more time in my day simply because I wasn't traveling to different meetings. And one of the things that some of my colleagues and some of my mentors guided each other, we did this together, we offered ourselves up to be a resource because immediately people had questions. People had questions about the stock market. They had questions about their 401k. They had questions about budgeting and just things that they had very high levels of anxiety about and really felt where they had nowhere to turn. So what I tried to do was get the word out. Hey, listen, I am devoting 90 minutes of my day every day to simply field questions. There's no cost, there's no obligation. It's simply an opportunity to ask questions about things that you're feeling anxious about. And it was great. I began to immediately get some responses, and people started to reach out, and I started to have things like budgeting conversations because people were worried about making ends meet with reduced hours. Maybe they had a spouse that had been furloughed, and they were worried about paying the mortgage. And we kind of walked through the budgeting process to say, all right, these are the areas where you might be able to cut. These are the areas you can't. And let's just kind of see, what does your landscape really look like? And that transitioned into giving some advice about things that are part of somebody's financial picture, but certainly nothing that I do individually, like unemployment, for example, or then with the stimulus passing with the SBA loans and the payroll protection program loans. Those are not things that I'm directly involved in, but it became pretty clear right away that I needed to become a resource for that because a lot of my clients are also small business owners, and they were worried about keeping their payroll moving, keeping their employees in place and compensated, and also keeping their doors open. So pivoting to kind of be a resource became something that was not only just a feel-good thing, but it became valuable, I felt, to the people that are out there.
Absolutely. And I admire the fact that you've been willing to field all kinds of different questions about these things. So as you can imagine, as a small business owner who does a lot of networking personally, I have heard a lot of different information about the PPP and some other opportunities that the SBA is sort of leveraging for folks. So I connect with a lot of small business owners. I know that a lot of them already have fiduciaries, but they're getting a lot of different input, not only from their own fiduciary, but from their networking streams as well. So if I'm a small business owner that's watching this today, what are some of the things that I should reach out to you for, especially now that the PPP initial funding is gone? I feel like there's some people that have missed that boat and they're sort of scrambling a little bit. You could be a resource to help them. Sure.
Well, number one, as of yesterday, there was more funds released by the government specifically to the PPP. So they may not have missed the boat. So I encourage those types of business owners, feel free to reach out to give me questions. The number one thing is to work with your lender, your bank, that may be an SBA loan advisor. They may be an SBA lender. They can give you guidance, and it might be in your best interest to pursue that avenue. There's also the traditional SBA disaster loan. You do that directly online at sba.gov. That may or may not be an option for you as well. But ultimately, like anybody, Glenn, it comes down to your individual situation. So a hair salon doesn't have as many options as, say, a restaurant, as, say, a real estate agent. So if you're a small business owner and you have some questions, let's have a conversation.
Absolutely. And speaking of, those sort of options that are available to folks, and not really, and people not understanding what all their options are, a little bit more back into your wheelhouse with Northwestern Mutual. The other thing that you're doing that I really enjoy is not only are you helping folks get through that SBA, PPP, alphabet soup to figure out what's the right option for them, or at least the sounding board, you've really done an outstanding job of connecting with your clients and other folks as far as retirement goes. So we just went through this massive stock decline. From my standpoint, I know at some point that's going to start to affect folks' feelings, at least, of being able to afford long-term care, assisted living placements, even in-home supports and home modifications and those things. So I love the fact that people can reach out to you. And I think from what I've gathered a little bit of information, it sounds like most people are in a really good position. It's going to be okay. Again, this is just a blip. But maybe folks that are sort of in that shorter term planning phase, they're in their late 70s, early 80s, some sort of long-term supports are going to be necessary sooner. So I love the fact that people can reach out to you and ask those kind of questions, and maybe you could give a little bit of advice on what you're seeing as far as where you think we're going to be in a couple months, a couple of years, what folks should do based on their timeline as well.
Sure. So starting with, if I knew the answers, Glenn, then, maybe we aren't talking because I'm off living on a beach somewhere, The number one thing is don't freak out. Do not make a knee-jerk decision. We don't know exactly when we're coming out of this, but one thing we do know is that we're coming out of this. What I'm hearing and what our experts are telling us is that, bear in mind that there was not an economic event that triggered this sort of thing. There was not, a thing like you made reference to 2007, 2008, where we had a real estate hurdle that was brought out by poor activity. There isn't an economic event here. This is something that is reacting to this medical event. So once we clean that part up, yeah, there's going to be a long-lasting impact, but we're going to come out of this. The important thing is everybody in history that we can point to thought that the sky was falling. And in 1929, that was a pretty big deal for a lot of people. And it lasted quite a while, but guess what? We pulled out of it. And in the 70s, we had the oil crisis, and you probably remember that. And everybody thought the sky was falling, and guess what? We pulled out of that. 9/11 was a horrible day for this country. It changed the world, and the economy suffered, but we pulled out of it. 2007, 2008, tough time for a lot of different people, but we pulled out of it. So the point is, we're going to come out of this. And history has shown that people that invest now are in a very strong position. If you have extra cash to deploy, we're recommending that you do it, because when it comes back, you're going to be in a really good position. So you don't want to time the market, of course, but bear in mind that now's not a time for knee-jerk reactions. It's time for long-term planning.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that, Steve. I know that as a fiduciary, there are certain requirements on you. So I appreciate you even coming on the show. But I think this is a fantastic way for people that want to have a question answered but are concerned about being sold to or being overwhelmed by somebody, to just be able to reach out. I know from my personal standpoint, you and I have connected a few times for some one-to-one meetings. You have always been a wealth of information without being pushy. So the second that I heard you mention that you were doing this, I really love the concept. So we will make sure that folks have access to your phone number, your email, your web address, and everything else so that they can connect with you and get that sort of answer, whether the answer is just a simple question out of you, or for those folks that really do need some advice on their financial planning, you would be a wonderful connection for them as well.
Yeah, happy to help. Ask away. No question is a silly question. Happy to help.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate your time today, Steve. This is normally when I ask my beautiful wife if she has any questions. I'm so looking forward to having her full time in a week. But I know Christy appreciates you coming on with us today as well. We look forward to having lunch with you somewhere in the Lakes region just as soon as we can go back out in public. But in the meantime, if folks have any questions that they would just like to bounce off somebody that really knows what they're talking about, please feel free to reach out to Steve at the phone number and information provided. And again, Steve, I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Sure, Glenn, I appreciate that too. And I also want to make it clear that I live down in the Portsmouth area, but I am licensed in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. I'm sure you have clients all over New England. I'm happy to help anywhere. So please feel free to reach out, and thank you for the opportunity. And I appreciate being able to spread the word and let people know that we're here to help.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve.